Buckle up, because what started as a few whispers about Caitlin Clark's treatment in the WNBA has officially detonated into one of the wildest, most unpredictable political and sports firestorms in recent history. A full-blown civil rights probe that's got the Trump administration, the DOJ, and half of Washington watching the hardwood like it's a live congressional hearing, with the WNBA commissioner herself smack dab in the middle of the chaos, sweating under the spotlight and trying to explain how the league that preached empowerment and equality somehow ended up accused of bias, double standards, and straight-up negligence toward its biggest superstar. And let's be clear, this isn't just about missed foul calls or rough play anymore. It's become a cultural battle over who controls the narrative in women's sports, who gets protected, and whether justice in athletics means more than hashtags and halftime speeches. Because when clips of Clark getting slammed, shoved, and outright targeted went viral week after week, while refs swallowed their whistles and league officials posted feel-good tweets, fans saw it for what it was: favoritism, hypocrisy, and a leadership vacuum so deep it could swallow the whole brand. The moment the Wall Street Journal hinted months ago that the federal government might have to intervene if the league refused to protect its stars, everyone laughed it off. But here we are now with subpoenas looming, lawyers circling, and the Trump administration smelling blood in the water, seizing the chance to frame Clark not just as an athlete, but as a symbol. America's golden girl, the embodiment of grit and meritocracy, unfairly punished by a system too busy playing politics to protect its brightest light. And if that narrative takes root, it's game over for the league's leadership, because you cannot claim progressivism while your most marketable player is being publicly battered and ignored. Stephen A. Smith called it months ago, shouting from the mountaintop that this was coming, that Trump's people were watching, that the second the base caught wind of a cultural figure like Clark being mistreated, it would explode. And explode it has, because now every talking head, from ESPN to Fox to fringe political podcasts, is dissecting every foul, every headline, every quote, and turning what used to be sports analysis into a national referendum on fairness, gender, and political opportunism. The WNBA commissioner, who just months ago was tweeting about inclusivity and sisterhood, now finds herself portrayed as the tone-deaf executive who let her league become a symbol of bias and bureaucratic apathy. A leader who watched her own referees turn blind eyes to violent play while hiding behind PR jargon and empowerment slogans, as though the world wouldn't notice the hypocrisy, but the world did notice, and the internet never forgets. There's a highlight reel on X, Twitter, titled, "The Hits That Changed the League," millions of views deep, showing Clark getting decked without a whistle, and fans are livid, calling it a disgrace, comparing her treatment to how LeBron or Curry would have been protected like state secrets. And now, with the DOJ sniffing around and Trump's advisors reportedly framing this as a civil rights issue, yes, civil rights, the WNBA's carefully built image of unity and justice is cracking like thin glass under the heat of national outrage. This is more than a scandal, it's a reckoning, because when the feds get involved, it's not for show. And sources are saying internal memos, referee communications, and player complaints are being pulled apart line by line to determine if there was institutional bias. If someone up top decided Clark's fame was too disruptive, too white-hot, too threatening to the league's balance of power. And if so, then we're not just talking fines or firings, we're talking federal accountability, a nightmare scenario for sponsors like Nike, Gatorade, and State Farm, who now have to decide if they want their logos floating next to words like civil rights investigation. Meanwhile, Clark herself stands calm in the storm, the eye of this insane cultural hurricane, quietly practicing, signing autographs, and unwittingly becoming a political icon. Because every time a politician mentions her name, her stock rises higher. Every brand wants her, every network wants her story. And she's not just a player anymore, she's a movement. A living test case for what happens when talent, gender, and politics collide in the modern media age. The irony is painful. The same league that once acted like it didn't need her star power is now begging her to stay positive while the entire structure around her burns from the heat of federal inquiry. And the same players who mocked her popularity or called her privileged are now posting unity messages as if that'll erase months of viral footage showing them taking cheap shots. You can smell the panic in every corporate statement, each one more desperate than the last, and the commissioner's latest attempt to calm the storm, a short 2-paragraph press release saying they welcome transparency, was basically an admission that they're cornered. Because when Washington starts asking for documents, there's no hiding behind hashtags or sponsorship campaigns, only truth or consequences. This whole thing could have been avoided. That's the cruel twist if the league had just applied its own rules evenly, if refs had called the fouls, if leadership had stood up and said, "This stops now," instead of gaslighting fans and pretending everything was fine. But arrogance and politics blinded them, and now the investigation's expanding. Sources say the NBA might even get roped in. Since gambling irregularities and bias overlap in some of the same internal reports, meaning the entire basketball ecosystem could face a storm of oversight. Stephen A. Smith says it's just the beginning, that Trump's team sees this as a cultural battleground, that if they can frame Caitlin Clark as a symbol of merit punished by woke bureaucracy, they win the narrative war. And you better believe the media will eat that up. Fox will frame her as a victim of progressive hypocrisy. MSNBC will call it political exploitation. ESPN will try to play both sides. And the fans? The fans will just keep replaying the hits, the hard fouls, the ignored pleas, because it's all right there in high definition, impossible to deny. And yet, through it all, Caitlin Clark keeps rising, because that's what symbols do. They transcend, they outlast, they become the story, and she's now bigger than any league, any commissioner, or even any administration trying to use her name. But make no mistake, this investigation will change everything. The referees will face questioning, coaches will testify, execs will scramble to lawyer up, sponsors will pull contracts, and by the time it's over, the WNBA might look completely different. Stripped bare of its polished PR veneer and forced to confront its own failures in the most public way possible. And while the commissioner clings to her job and insists this is all just a learning moment, everyone knows that spin. The court of public opinion has already rendered its verdict. Guilty of leadership failure, guilty of hypocrisy, guilty of underestimating the power of one player who turned into a movement. This saga, this spectacle, this explosion of sport and politics is far from over. In fact, it's only just beginning, because when the federal government, the media, and millions of fans collide on the same narrative battlefield, there's no going back to business as usual, no quiet off-season to reset. Caitlin Clark has become the face of a cultural revolution disguised as a basketball story. And whether you see her as a victim, a hero, or a pawn, you can't deny she's changed everything because now the questions are too big to ignore. Was she targeted? Was she failed by her league? Was this about race, gender, power, or plain old jealousy? And most of all, who benefits from the chaos? The Trump administration sees an opportunity to reclaim the heart of middle America through sports, to frame themselves as the defenders of fairness against elitist institutions. And the WNBA, ironically, handed them the perfect case study by ignoring the most obvious problem on their court. So as senators start making statements, as subpoenas start flying, as the internet keeps churning out viral clips and memes, and as fans turn their outrage into activism, we're witnessing something bigger than basketball. It's a cultural collision where politics meets identity, where justice becomes a headline, and where Caitlin Clark, once just a college phenom turned rookie sensation, now stands as a national flashpoint in the fight over what fairness really means. So yeah, the commissioner's in the hot seat, the league's under siege, the Trump administration's in the mix, and Caitlin Clark's name is echoing from the arenas to the Oval Office, a symbol of power, politics, and perseverance. And in this story, no matter how messy, no matter how politically charged, one truth cuts through all the noise. The world finally realized that when the game stops being fair, it stops being just a game, and that realization has unleashed a storm that no amount of PR spin, corporate partnership, or hollow apology will ever be able to contain.